Kara, this is a company with a purpose. What was the inspiration and motivation for founding the company?
So, so a little over 13 years ago, I was not doing CPG. I was actually in tech. I was at, I guess most people call it tech, but I was at AOL. So there's some jokes, especially in Silicon Valley, as to whether or not that was tech or not. But so I was running AOL's e-commerce and shopping for 7 years. And after leaving AOL when it was $1 billion in revenue to the company, I started my family, was living in San Francisco, and really wanted to take this time that I was, not just starting my family, but also feeling like it's time that I'm going to go and get healthy. And so I started working out and shopping at Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, and I thought as long as I do all of those things, then it's just going to miraculously kind of happen for me, and I'm going to get healthier. I had no specific health issues at that point, but I was almost 50 pounds overweight. I had terrible adult acne. I had no energy, and I went to a bunch of different doctors who said, stop eating the cupcakes and stop, just sitting on the couch every day. And, I was like, I'm not doing any of those things, really. And so one day, after just committing to myself that I was going to pay attention to everything that I was putting into my body and really kind of, taking a closer look, I realized that, truly my best friend, above and beyond my husband and my kids, was my Diet Coke. I loved Diet Coke. I would wake up every single morning and I would start my day with Diet Coke. In fact, now people who worked for me at AOL said that they used to be terrified to come into a meeting if I didn't actually have a Diet Coke in my hand. So no one ever told me that at the time, but that was, really my, trademark, was having this soda with me. And
you weren't alone. I mean, in that era, I would say most of the CEOs I worked with always had a Diet Coke.
Always have the diet.
As soon as they finished, someone would replace it for them.
That was me. And so basically, I just decided that because I didn't understand the 30 ingredients in this soda, I would swap it out for drinking plain water. I had heard, over and over again, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Arizona. I should have been drinking a lot more water, but wasn't. But I just decided I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water today and every day, and I'm not going to go to sleep at night until I drink those 8 glasses. I was a gymnast growing up, an athlete, so I knew what it was going to take. I was very focused to do this. And so basically, after living this way for 2.5 weeks of doing nothing else but swapping out my Diet Coke for plain water, I lost over 20 pounds. And in 6 months, I lost over 50 pounds. And then I really started looking at, am I really accurate at what I'm doing and what I'm not doing? And at this point, I went back to a bunch of different doctors because I was losing weight so fast that I thought, am I actually really sick now? And basically, nobody had any type of conclusion. And then I was so bored of water, but I had sort of met my health, challenges at this point, not just with weight, but also with acne was another thing. I developed this terrible acne over the course of, the last 10 years. And so at this point, I just decided, what is going to allow me to drink more water? I'm just going to start throwing fruit in water. So every kind of fruit imaginable, I'd take a bunch of raspberries, I'd throw it in, I'd take lemon, I'd take cucumber, whatever it was. And so I began to be the girl who was like, oh, what does she have in her water today? Like, I'd go to the gym, and then, friends would say, oh, you have a pomegranate in your water? That's really interesting. And so finally, I'm still interviewing for jobs, with different tech firms at this point. I've decided that I wanted to go back. I didn't want to do what I thought was a crazy commute from San Francisco to Palo Alto, which was like 30 to 40 minutes, and which back then was sort of the key thing. And so I thought, I'm going to, just continue kind of like trying to actually do, something that really is going to make sense and continuing on my health issues. And so finally, one day I was at my local Whole Foods, and I started talking to the guy stocking the shelf, and I said, listen, I want a product that just is water with just some fruit in it. And he pointed to another product that I didn't drink much of, but I knew lots of friends were drinking vitamin water. And vitamin water 14 years ago had more sugar in it than a can of Coke. And so I started having this dialogue with the guy stocking the shelves at Whole Foods around, why is it that these words are actually, doing kind of the opposite of what consumers think they're doing. So for me, it was, Diet Coke. Like, I thought I was actually doing better by having diet. And vitamin water actually encourages people to think that it's, healthier. And so the guy at Whole Foods said, you seem so passionate about this and so interested, and, you really seem like you've found your purpose. And I remember going home to my husband, who had been an IP attorney and had taken a little time off and had been a CEO of a healthcare startup. And I said, okay, I've got it now. I'm going to start this company. It's a beverage company. And the name of the company is called Wawa. And he was very concerned. And he said, he's a New Yorker. He said, listen, if you don't, I think this is kind of a terrible idea, but if you don't think about, anything else and listen to me, just do that one thing. Don't call it Wawa, because there's this small chain in Pennsylvania that will actually crush you like a bug if you actually get any type of success.
Best free legal advice you ever got.
Right. And so, but, he saw the same thing that I did, which was that consumers were being fooled. I had been fooled by words, and that if we could actually get people to enjoy water again, then we wouldn't even be talking about a national healthcare system. We would be, really trying to help consumers, enjoy water who, like me, really didn't like water. We didn't think that there was anything wrong with it. I just didn't like it.
So you did some research. I mean, you consulted the traditional beverage industry executives. What did they tell you?
So about, 6 months into this journey, we had gotten it on the shelf at Whole Foods. I say we because I think my husband, we were self-funding the company. I was writing $50,000, $100,000 checks like they were, pennies. I mean, I was writing them really, really fast to start this company. And my husband said, so wait, what are you doing exactly? And so he joined the company just, making sure that we weren't going to go bankrupt over this, somewhat crazy idea. And so the two of us were literally putting cases in our Grand Cherokee and delivering them to Whole Foods. And people, we didn't tell very many of our friends who were in tech, because we thought, if this thing doesn't work out, this probably, nobody will really know. We'll just sort of keep it to ourselves. And so we, we were continuing to sort of live this life of delivering it. And then finally, we were in Whole Foods and some other Draegers and I think a few other stores. And then when we went into Safeway to sell the product to Safeway, they said that your shelf life is too short. And we said, oh, what does a shelf life need to be? And they said, oh, it needs to be at least 12 months. We were lucky if our shelf life was 3 months, and we could not figure out how to get our product to a 12-month shelf life. And so a friend of mine knew some executives at Coca-Cola and said, you should really talk to this guy. I'd met him before and see what he has to say. And I didn't intend on having this conversation with him on this call, but after he picked up the phone and was probably not having that great of a day, I said, super nice to meet you. I'm in all these stores in the Bay Area. I'm a tech executive. I really have no business doing this company anyway. You can just have the company. And his response, which was quite surprising to me, which was, sweetie, Americans love sweet. This isn't going anywhere. And I was like, what did he just say to me? He just called me sweetie. then I was making excuses for him, like maybe he's from the South, and maybe that's why he's calling me sweetie. But then I really realized that it's, you know, he was kind of going, I had this vision of him going down one river with the way that he really believed that the world was headed. And again, this was 13 years ago. I mean, I today talk frequently with entrepreneurs about I was way ahead of my time, way ahead. And so what I, you know, was listening, as I was listening to this executive talk to me about, you know, why the world wasn't ready for sweet, I also had a roommate of mine from college who worked for the Center for Disease Control, still works for the Center for Disease Control, and she had been put on this, this new group that had formed in the CDC, which was type 2 diabetes. And they were trying to figure out exactly what was causing this thing, type 2 diabetes. And at that point, 13 years ago, it was 2% of the population had this disease in the US called type 2 diabetes. They knew that it was very different from type 1 diabetes, but they didn't really understand exactly what it was. The consistent thread was that the people that were being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes back then were claiming to actually eat and drink things that were diet and low fat. And so that was the like tiny little thread that they saw in the consistency. And so I was hearing that, also talking to the soda executive and realizing at that point that if I didn't actually take on this responsibility, which truly seemed like I was gathering all of this information for a reason, that I finally found my purpose, that I needed to go off and do this, that no soda company was going to take this on in the name of health. And so I got off the phone with the soda executive and I said to my husband, I'm like, we're in. Like, you don't have to do this with me, but like, I'm in. I'm 100% into this company because I'm going to actually figure out how to get people to enjoy water again. And so, you know, there's many other stories along the way of trying to figure out distribution and fighting up against the soda executives who, you know, have all their tricks and games along the way, but.
So several challenges there. How did you settle on Hint? And when did you?
Okay, so
You're
Wawa.
from Wawa, right?
Best name in the world, right? I wanted the Wawa, and that wasn't going to happen. And so my husband said, he was an IP lawyer, and he said, just keep talking to me about, you know, what is this product? And I said, so we're giving people hints, blah, 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 blah. It's just a hint of. And then finally I said, hint. And he said, 4-letter word, never, ever going to happen. And so I said, okay, you are not making me happy today at all on a lot of different levels. And so, and you put your lawyer hat on. You're not involved in this business. This is my business. And so I need you to go and trademark Hint, or at least try and trademark Hint, and also drink water, not sugar. And he's laughing at this point because he's like, it's not going to happen that you're going to actually get these trademarks. And I really didn't like him at this point because I thought on so many levels he's really negative. And I said, you know, and there's something else. I'm going to this plant in Chicago, and I've found this female bottler who has agreed to let me do a small run of the product, and it'd be really great if you went with me because I'm pregnant with our 4th child. Like, stood there. And he said, I can't believe you're telling me that we're like going to have another child and you're starting a beverage company. Like, this is crazy on so many levels. And I'm like, yep, it is what it is. So just like, that's what's happening. And so he said, okay, fine, I'll go with you to the bottling plant. And the whole way to Chicago, we were, you know, he's like looking at me, are you okay? Like, is everything fine? I mean, I didn't really know about all this. And so, but very quickly, you know, he saw that like just by actually producing a product that, you know, is worst case a couple dollars a bottle for consumers, you can actually change your health by enjoying water again.
So you solved the branding problem. You convinced him.
Yes.
How did you solve the shelf life problem?
So, so we We really started to look, and again, it was just the two of us early on. We really started to look at other industries and other categories that were getting longer shelf lives. And one in particular that I saw was juice. And so one day I was looking at a label in Molly Stone's, and I saw that there was a little mark that said where it was produced down in Watsonville. And I thought, oh, I've been down to Watsonville before, driven by there, and I started looking up who was actually bottling apple juice down in Watsonville. And I called the gentleman who was a big apple producer, and I started talking to him about, like, how are you actually producing like a shelf-stable product for apple juice, because I see it on the worm shelves. And he said, it's just what we do in the juice. Nobody really does it in water. And I said, is there a specific reason why we can't do it in water? And he said, I said, can I come down to Watsonville and come talk to you? And he said, the only time I actually have to speak with you is at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. So I said, I'll be there. And I don't think he expected that we were actually going to show up. And my husband said, can I come with you? Like, it's a little weird. You're going to Watsonville at 2 a.m. And I said, yeah. And I said, I don't know. He said it could be anywhere between 2 and 4 because he was running, all night long. And so I said, we should probably just bring a sleeping bag with us, like just to sit there on the floor and like make sure that this guy knows. And I don't think he actually thought we were going to show up. He said, what'd you do before? And I said, I was in tech, and I think he thought that we were actually going to no-show. His name's Tom Ryder, and he's still like a very good friend of ours now, but he just thought it was so crazy that we were willing to be so scrappy and ultimately, take a look at how do you actually produce something. But, I talk a lot about, the tech industry, how in the tech industry, it's never about like, oh, something can't be done. I was taught to think, okay, we just need to bring other people in the room or other partners to help us think about something. It's about solving a problem. It's not about putting up walls in front to say that something can't be done. And so when I got to the beverage industry, the CPG industry, I felt like there were all these walls around me saying, oh, that can't be done. Like, unless you put preservatives in your product, you're not actually going to get a shelf life. And I think coming from the tech industry and an entirely different industry where my lens, and it was, I have no idea what I'm doing, and now I'm going to jump into this industry and actually try and figure something out and not have any ideas that like, oh, was a big vice president at my last company and this is what I'm going to do. And I also feel like on the supplier side and on the producer side too, that they saw that I wasn't walking in saying like, I know exactly what I'm doing, and it was the opposite. I was walking in saying, I really don't understand it, but I'm willing to be here at any hour to actually roll up my sleeves and figure this out with you. So we had a number of people early on who were saying what we were doing was impossible, and ultimately, what we ended up doing was producing a product with no preservatives, which is now done and used by many of the soda and other sort of flavored water manufacturers. And prior to us, no one was doing a product in water using real fruit without preservatives.
That's the hallmark of entrepreneurship, is doing
100%.
Things that people have told you is impossible. So it started to sell at Whole Foods, and you got to the point where you needed to scale. How did you raise money?
Yeah, so so early on, we self-funded the company for the first couple of years, and I always, right or wrong, I say to entrepreneurs, I still wanted to have dinner with my friends when, instead of having them say like, how's that investment doing? I didn't want to have those conversations. And so we were able to self-fund the company for the first couple of years, and then we took, we got a phone call from a previous investor to vitamin water. Vitamin water had been sold for a very nice return to Coca-Cola for $4.2 billion. And so the Stella Beer family had been involved in that. They had advisory board rights and were big investors in that, and they had just gotten out. And so they had heard about what we were doing and asked to come and meet with us. And so they came in and they said, look, you know, we think you guys are a little bit ahead of where the rest of not only the US is, but the rest of the world is, but we're excited to come in and fund this. And so they put a chunk of money in. They've continued to put chunks of money in throughout the years. And then we also felt like early on, we actually had Google was trying to recruit me and recruit my husband, actually, to come into the company when they were just starting on University Avenue. And Omid Kordasani, I'll never forget, I'm sitting with Omid, and he said, what exactly, you guys are doing something. I can't exactly figure out what you guys are spending your time doing. And so finally I said, look, I'm not ready to take a job yet in tech. I'm really excited about what I'm doing at Hint. And he said, so talk to me about Hint. And I said, it's a product that helps people get off of sugar and diet sweeteners. And he said, okay, well, I don't really understand exactly what you're doing with Hint, but we've decided to bring chefs in to Google to actually cook for us, and because it's taking too long for people to go out to lunch every day, like they've got to wait for a table, and then they eat, and then they come back, and then 2 hours later, we've got our employees back, so we decided, let's hire some chefs in. And I don't know what we're doing about drinks, but that seems like a logical next step. So here's the guy's phone number. You should give him a call. And so I called him, and he said, sure, Omid says great things about you. Just send in 10 cases. And I said, okay, great. And he said, how much is it? And I was like, oh, you guys are actually going to pay for the product? Like, it's amazing. It's great. And so I said, $10 a case. So and he said, who's going to deliver it? And I was like, me. I'm going to deliver it. I'm going to load up the Grand Cherokee and come down there and deliver it. So he delivered it, and then he called a couple of days later, and he said, we'll take 30 cases. And then a couple weeks later, 100 cases, and Google was continuing to grow. And so Google became one of our largest stores, or whatever they're called, companies for our product for very, very quickly. And then people would leave Google and go and start other great companies.
Oh, it's caught on throughout Silicon Valley, right?
Caught on. And so we became, the largest beverage in Silicon Valley. And what's really fascinating about, that one conversation with Omid was that what they saw inside of Google was that where they had sick days were excessive in certain parts of the company, they would actually load in Hint or plain water into those areas. And so they realized that without actually telling people, they could actually convince people to start drinking more water just by having another option there. And so they would see that they could actually leave it to Google to start mapping this stuff out. And so over the years, it's funny because it hasn't come from us. It's come from Google having conversations, their food service and their HR departments having conversations with different people. So, I probably get 6 of those phone calls a year from companies all over the US who are saying, we've got this problem with type 2 diabetes, which is 40% of the population. It's getting higher and higher within companies as well. And so if they can actually use a product like Hint to actually take their the diseases down within their companies, then they have gone back into their health insurance carriers and shown that they're actually doing something proactively to, create a better environment for their employees. So.
There's we should finish off the fundraising. So after the initial money from friends,
so I started on that. So so we really wanted to leave room for friends and families and fans of the brand. And so a number of people who were just fans inside of Silicon Valley started drinking our product, and we reached out on AngelList, and that was, are you guys all familiar with AngelList? So it was an interesting thing because there's a few other angel investment networks that probably have more food and beverage on it, and so when we decided to actually post on AngelList, I remember the founder of AngelList called me and said, you know, I'm a huge fan of Hint. I just don't really think that this is the platform for you guys. And I said, but we have a lot of people who drink Hint, so it might work, and there's no sort of downside. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And we raised, you know, close to $10 million within like a couple of days. I mean, it was insane. And people were, you know, saying to us, like, we've been drinking your product for years, and we wanted to diversify our own portfolio, and we'd love to be able to have, you know, your product. And so it's been an interesting strategy because people will say to us, like, how do you get, you know, certain people to be up on a platform just drinking Hint, and do you put it in their, like, rider? I'm like, rider in Silicon Valley? Like, no, they just drink our product. And you know, and even, you know, John Legend, I mean, he came in actually before AngelList, but people, you know, still with John, I mean, we don't try and control anything that John does. He's just a huge fan of what we're doing and is, you know, constantly out drinking the product, so.
So no professional venture capital?
No, so.
Traipsing up and down Sand Hill Road with a
No,
business plan?
so, well, you know, it's interesting. It's not to say that we didn't do that. I think a few years ago, you know, we really started to see that we did have a lot of people in Silicon Valley who were drinking the product, who were fans of the product, and many of these venture firms reached out to me and said, gosh, I love your product, like if you guys raise money, come in and talk to us. But I think the fear of so many VCs was not really what we feared, which was, you know, what will Coke and Pepsi do to you? I mean, that was sort of the net of like what they kept coming back to, and they didn't have enough experience in sort of a, you know, with the soda industry, and these guys were big behemoth people. And it's actually really interesting when you think about, you know, what so many of these VCs feared. It wasn't really what I feared at all. And, you know, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, I mean, when I look at the soda industry today, I see the cigarette industry. And I see large public companies who, unless they actually sell more sugar and more sweet, then they don't move the needle. And so, and you know, today it's, you know, the U.S. has been a terrifically tough market for the soda industry. And so the soda industry has taken their sales forces and gone into places like Saudi Arabia and China, and you know, and if you map those things against what we saw in the U.S. with, you know, just type 2 diabetes alone, I mean, 50% of the population in Beijing today under the age of 18 has type 2 diabetes. It's the fastest growing rate of children having type 2 diabetes. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it's also one of, you know, Coca-Cola's strongest markets. And, you know, it's not just Coke. I mean, Pepsi has gone into India. I mean, today the average lifespan of a woman in India is 48 years old. She's dying of heart disease, which probably was type 2 diabetes prior to actually getting the heart disease. So, so it's, you know, we need to wake up as a society and start to get people to really enjoy water and frankly, clean water.
So it's been written many times that Hint is the fastest growing non-alcoholic beverage in the country, in the world, I don't know which. That's amazing. Yeah. Probably not missed by Coke and Pepsi. If Coke made you an offer you couldn't refuse, would you refuse it?
So people frequently ask me, like, when is Coke or Pepsi going to buy you? I now, you know, in the last 13 years say, when am I going to buy Coke? I mean, I've lived through many other companies that have gone through challenges. I mean, look at what happened to Sears. I mean, like, never would have thought, right? So I think for me, it's really about can we change health? And I think if a company does not have that as kind of their mindset, then the statistic that you were talking about the largest non-alcoholic beverage that doesn't have an investment or partnership with Coke, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper Snapple. So we've been able to build out a network without using their money. And there's no other company, including Vitamin Water, I mean, that Vitamin Water had very early on, past 15 million, they could not figure out how to actually build out without having an investment from Dr. Pepper Snapple. So that's, that is really an interesting thing. But, we're now, we're profitable as a company, which is also something that, I don't think you hear about too much in Silicon Valley. I always, people,
all about growth.
Sand Hill Road will say, why do you care about profitability? And I, not to say that we're not going to reinvest into the company, but for me, I really wanted to get this thing to profitability, and we've done it, and now we'll see.
A minute ago, you mentioned culture. Let's talk a little bit about the culture of your company inside. First of all, it's 60% or so women?
A little higher.
Higher?
Yeah.
But you, when you told me that the other day, you said it wasn't by design. It just happened.
Yeah. So we're 140 people in the company now. Up in San Francisco, we have, I think, about 50 of those people are working up in San Francisco. We have a very non-traditional kind of office, in case anybody, has anyone seen our place on Union Street? So we have 4 storefronts that we've created this environment. We've used one of them as purely a store, and then the rest of them we're using for office spaces. And basically, we looked at, as we were growing out the company, we really wanted it to be a place where people felt like they were working for something that had purpose, and I think that that's sort of like the key element. But when we were starting to look at building out and who to hire, I think this is what we were discussing a little bit. I don't know why we have so many women, other than the fact that, I think that has been clearly a big piece of who our customer base is, number one, and people want to work for something that has purpose, et cetera. But I also, have this theory that there are some men, not like you, that don't necessarily want to work for a female CEO. And and I'm happy that they don't actually show up for the job interview, right? Because I would rather know that prior to them actually coming into the company, that they don't want to be here. Having said that, we have a lot of great men in our company.
But your CEO is a man, I understand.
So our COO.
COO, sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
I missed
So, so my husband, who is our chief operating officer. So I think there's definitely men in the company, but I'm not really sure. And having said that, too, I feel like we've got a lot of super qualified individuals, and not just because they're women. I mean, they're the best people who are the most passionate, who really care about not just growing a business that is going up against the soda companies, but also one that truly helps themselves get healthier, their family get healthier, and society get healthier as a whole.
We'll leave some time for questions in a minute, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about what's your advice to entrepreneurs?
So in what sense?
I recently read an article you posted, I think on LinkedIn, about self-doubt. And the message there is basically don't let self-doubt get in your way.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a tiny bit about this, but I think that the key thing for me was, when I was starting this company, was I really felt like I didn't know anything about starting this company, and therefore I wasn't qualified to actually go and start it. And again, with the experience in tech, I felt like it was something that I had grown up in a industry where it was like, let's just sit there and think about what the problem is and try and pull the pieces apart and solve the problem. And so I look back on my initial stages of sort of thinking about how do I staff this company is pull in lots of soda executives because they have lots more experience. They were actually the worst people that we actually had in this company because they were all naysayers and saying like, you can't produce a product that doesn't have preservatives in it. We did. You can't get shelf space. We did. You can't, 40% of our business now is direct to consumer. What soda company understands direct to consumer? There were so many like can'ts, but we did it. And so again, I look at if you've got the passion and you've got the curiosity and you've got the interest to actually change a category, I think that that's the biggest thing that you have going for you.
Are there questions? Oh, so who's got the mic? Oh, there it is. It's on its way. Well, one's on its way. No, there's one right by there, but we'll use the other one too.
Curious, I was looking at your bottle and it says Whole 30 approved. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Whole 30 is a health program that a lot of people have followed, particularly over the last few years. That is something, it's interesting about Hint because I would say that we've been on, almost every diet plan that's out there that we don't have any affiliation with, but it's something that we're very friendly to all of those diets. So it's something that is something that we're a part of. So we're approved by that. There are very few beverages that are actually approved by that. So that's what's kind of a big deal.
Okay, and I do need your help. So, by the way, you are back in high tech because I was in Facebook and all their coolers are full of Hint. So you're back in. So I have Hint in my refrigerator, and my husband's going in. He's starting this, sugar buster diet. So I said, you should try Hint. And he goes, but it's fruit, and fruit is sugar. So help me convince him that Hint is good for him.
Yeah. So back in my kitchen, back in the day when I was taking the fruit. So initially I was slicing it up and just throwing it in the water. And then I started taking the fruit and boiling the fruit. And so when you boil something out, it's sort of, I always use the example of a cooked carrot versus a raw carrot. So we were just taking out every bit of water and all of the sugar from the fruits, and I was playing around with vegetables as well. And so we basically take all of the sugars out of the fruit. And there's only 2 to 3 drops per bottle of the actual flavor. We use, unlike some other products that you may have heard over the last couple of weeks that are using other stuff, we only use fruit. And the product is 100% fruit. Yep.
We've got time for one more question, maybe. Who's somebody in the back there?
I was just curious, what is your kind of longer term, what is your longer term strategic direction for your company? I mean, you've been so passionate about it, so I would think that a strategic buyer would have to be a very special kind of strategic buyer, not maybe, is the hope to continue to scale? Can you scale? I just want to get a sense of, I know that's a long question at this, but just in general, what's your direction for
Yeah. So our goal is to continue to grow. I mean, so this year I'll share a little bit of exciting news that I can't sort of bear to keep to myself. But our offline sales growth is 78% year-over-year growth, which is almost unheard of, right? So our online sales growth is almost 300%. So this is a company that has the big hockey stick right now. It's not to say, like, my team is used to having very senior executives, not just from soda companies, from big food companies, from pharmaceutical companies, come in. I'm more than happy to chat with people. Having said that, when they actually see what the growth is, they see that this is a profitable company, they're also like, interesting. Have you thought about taking this company public? Have you thought about, like, so it's not to say that, I think we have options. We have a lot of different options, but as long as this thing is like having that growth that we're seeing right now, I'm also, and hearing from consumers that we're actually helping them to change their health. And I'm still having fun too. I mean, that's the thing that is the most important thing that I, say to other entrepreneurs, that, they're like, gosh, you've been at it for a long time. I mean, 13 years. And I'm like, it's been 13 years? Like, seriously? I mean, I'm having so much fun. And I think that that's the key thing, that if you are still having a good time, you're still having high growth, do I have to worry about what I'm doing in terms of long term? I mean, when I start to see that I have a year that is like going a little down, going a little flat, then I start to really, I think, really have those conversations.
Erin, I know we're out of time, but there were a couple of other hands raised. Can we borrow a few minutes since we started late? Okay, please.
Listening to your story, you talk about...
There's a mic right in front.
Oh, you talk about being a mother of 4. You talk about overcoming challenges of weight and health and all of these things. How are you doing all that? How are you managing the personal? Because I just find it so difficult to manage all the various things. I mean, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that that's a very powerful lesson you have to share with us.
So I think to be a founder, you have to have a little crazy in you, right? Full disclosure. Like, the best founders have a little nutty in them. But I also think that I have kids that also watch what their mom is doing. As my 13-year-old told, he was interviewing for a school yesterday, and the interviewer said to me, they said, your son Justin, who, by the way, I was pregnant with when I was starting this company, was telling me about the company that you're doing. And when I said, like, so what does your mom do? I didn't realize you were the CEO, which is a whole other issue. But he said, so she's taken on the soda industry. And he said it with a totally straight face, right? And so I feel like, when you have a crew, which I, truly, my kids are now 19, 17, 16, and 13, which, like, I'm the bigger issue. I have 4 teenagers, right? Which is like a whole other, up and down, like, throughout the days. I mean, they really see that, like, they have parents that are doing stuff that really, in their mind and in my mind, has purpose. Right? So, and I'm not going to say that I'm balanced and that, like, every day is, like, dinner on the table and, calmness. It's not. I mean, it is not. But I think that I definitely, have done, I think my kids are normal, right? Like, as normal as can be. They're very independent. They look at, also their parents working together, which I think in today's society is, like, kind of interesting, right? It's not something that parents normally do. My husband and I typically don't travel together. He's the chief operating officer. I think you mentioned that. But I would say that, in many ways, people ask all the time, like, what's it like working with your husband? And we're very different skill sets on it's not for everybody. But I think we both appreciate the skill sets, but we also, like, know that, we have Hint and we have our family. Like, I don't have very many friends left. Like, I mean, I like have, Shelly will talk to me, and there's, like, a few other people, but people know that I'm pretty busy, right, along the way. But I think it's almost like we have almost less, because we've consolidated what we really care about and what our priorities are. So. And they've a couple of them have come to work for me. A couple of them don't want to work for me. So, which is fine. I'm like, that's great. Like, you guys should, go off and and see how great I am, and then come back and tell me, right? So,
These are great questions. We have time for one more. Erin, thank you. But Kara, are you going to be around for a few minutes?
I am.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing about your funding experience. Now that you're viable and you're profitable, are you still self-funding, or how's funding going now?
Yeah, so we're actually probably, so we're going out now to do our last little raise that I didn't plan on even talking about here today, but we're going out to do that. And I think that will, really, I mean, my goal is really to take this from, as I mentioned, we're just over 100 million as a company, and I want to take this to $1 billion. And so I don't even think about 200 million or 300 million. Like, I'm like this. So when people ask me, like, I'm like, that is like 200, 300 million is so like within range for me. Like, I like jump. Like, that is like not only my vision, but that execution is just happening. But we need more money in order to do that, to really grow this in the right way. But then I think it's like, it pretty much kind of runs on its own. There's not that much left to do it. We didn't talk about this. I know we're short on time, but we just launched another category, sunscreen, a couple of years ago. I had skin cancer on my nose, not something that a parent or a CEO wants to hear, and started looking at ingredients in sunscreen. So we removed oxybenzone and parabens. I'd heard about parabens. I'd never really heard about oxybenzone, and so now we have people like the Lauders who are coming into our office and saying, gosh, I didn't realize that oxybenzone could actually be removed from products and still have, a UV block. And we're like, yeah, you should do that too. So we not only feel like we're filling this role of helping consumers, but also helping large companies to just do better. And not, even if that means like, throwing away their formulas and reformulating so that consumers can actually get better. Like, if that is what my purpose is, then like we can still survive. We can still continue to grow. Like, we understand the difficulties for large companies to sort of do that and change. But, that's something that we look at as a company, and we're trying to get a couple of other products. We don't want to do 2,000 products. We want to do just a few other categories that we really think are obviously in need of change, and large companies will not make the first move to change because they worry about the rest of their SKUs. And what is the audience gonna do when, they see that you've got one message going and then they've got to reformulate all the rest of them? I mean, so anyway, it's an exciting time for Hint as a whole, and again, I love it. You guys should definitely come up to the store if you're up on Union Street and pop by. It's really fun. Super fun, yeah.
So there's one short question in the back. So promise to be short, and hopefully the answer's short.
Yeah, so the Kara Network started out of me telling friends, the ones that still will talk to me, about this exciting, conversation that I would have with people. And they said, oh gosh, I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. And so one day I said, do you mind if we just tape this? Because people will be really excited about, hearing your thoughts and advice. And I know you so well, but it'd be really great. And so I started videotaping it. And then sometimes they would have to be over the phone, so then I started audio taping it, and then it turned into this podcast. But basically, there's two different forks for the Kara Network. One is entrepreneurs, and so really helping entrepreneurs to develop their own ideas in lots of different categories. We touch on things like, I love when I hear that people were fired, right? And that they're now going off and doing really great things. Or that they couldn't get funded, and then they diverted and went into some other direction, and then they figured something else out. Or like, there's just great stories that I'm sure in Silicon Valley you've heard some of these stories, but they're just awesome things where people just picked themselves back up and did it. And then the second fork is something that I'm very passionate about that really happened for me after I started Hint was health. I had lots of doctors, lots of researchers who would reach out to me and talk to me about, things that we were doing around diet sweeteners and how, for example, if, this is a whole other 30-minute talk, but we're doing a lot of work in Washington right now around trying to change school lunch programs, really trying to change school lunch programs. School lunch programs today are basically run by the Dairy Association that has a lot of challenges with lots of different options out there, almond milk, soy milk, lots of different stuff. So they don't want anything to happen to our school lunches because they basically control them. So school lunch today is milk, orange juice, and tap water. Unfortunately, the tap water in the US today, 30%, is not clean enough for most communities to say that they're offering kids, the best possible water. So in places like Michigan, and not just Flint, Michigan, they have actually turned off the drinking fountains in Michigan, saying that basically the drinking fountains don't work. Like the drinking fountains work fine. It's that the water doesn't but basically kids don't have access to bottled water and they don't have access to a product like Hint. And so I get into sort of the nitty-gritty of talking to all kinds of people, researchers, people who have seen these roadblocks in nutrition experts within schools, et cetera. So again, it's sort of like a place where I can start to talk about lobbying efforts, lots of different stuff. So, and I can do whatever I want because it's the Kara Network, and right, that's what's great about starting your own thing. So you can just keep talking.
Tune into the Kara Network. Kara, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, you guys. Yeah, it was great.
We could listen to you all day, but we have to get to the next panel. But thank you.
Yeah.